Everyone's favourite underdogs, the Astra Militarum, are back with a vengeance, and in 10th edition, they're looking pretty damn good. Today's article goes into some of their upcoming rules and abilities, and I do have to say, things are looking up for the Humble Guardsman. As always, we get to see their army rule, which for the Guard is the voice of command, essentially their orders system that we all know and love. This still seems to be much like we know it from recent editions. Your officer units can issue out orders to nearby squads, and in each officer datasheet it will say how many and to who they can issue orders to. So for example, tank commanders will be able to issue it to vehicle units, command squads to infantry and that sort of thing. And then what you do is you choose a friendly eligible unit within 6 inches and they can receive one of the following buffs until your next command phase. They are mostly familiar to all of us now, things like move, giving you some extra movement, take aim, improving your ballistic skill, and take cover, giving you a bonus to your save. It's a very customizable, very flexible army rule, and it means that you can, in theory, kit out a huge swathe of your army with whatever buff is going to benefit that unit the most. So in my opinion, this is a really good, really solid army rule. They do state that, like stratagems, these bonuses don't have an effect if the unit receiving them is suffering from battle shock. So with your slightly lower than average guard leadership, it is going to be really important if you want to take advantage of this to make sure that your squads stay healthy and try to find all the ways you can to make sure that your battle shock tests go your way, or else this army rule just might not be quite as beneficial to you as you would want it to be. But I think overall, in general, this is a very solid ability, and it's going to give your guardsmen and your tanks and all your other units a huge boost to their overall usefulness. As ever, we also get to see a couple of data sheets. We get to see one for a troops choice and one for a slightly bigger beastie. The troops they show off are the Acadian shock troops, and as you would expect, they are still fairly flimsy. They are toughness 3 with 1 wound and a 5-up save. They do, however, still have an absolutely fantastic range of weaponry available, and 2 in every 10 can take a choice of plasma, melter, grenade launcher or flamer, although you can't double up. They also have a cool new addition where you can, in very much an AOS reinforcement style, like double the size of the squad, so you can either take them in a squad of 10 or you can take them as a bigger squad of 20, which is something I think they took away in 8th and 9th edition. I could be wrong, I don't play the Guard, but I know you used to be able to take big squads, and way back in the day you used to have companies, but I think at the moment in their codex you can just take them in a squad of 10. But in any case, in the new edition it looks like you will be able to have 20 bodies, and then in that case you can double up these special weapons, so you could in theory have 20 shock troops with 2 plasma guns and 2 melter in the unit, which does seem really quite cool in terms of their damage potential, as well as giving you a load of objective controlling power. They also get stated on their datasheet that they can have 2 leader units attached to them, so potentially there's going to be even more double buffing shenanigans like we saw with the Space Marines Lieutenant, who can join a unit along with another leader. So if there are some good buffs that certain Astra Militarum leaders and HQs give, you can potentially double that up and make one squad super efficient. And then they also get a new rule for their Voxcaster, which I believe at the moment just gives them a slightly increased range at which they can receive orders, but now it gives you the chance to generate an extra CP if you use a stratagem on the unit that has it. So it's not super reliable, it is only on a 5+ to generate that extra CP, but this should, over the course of a game, probably net you an extra 1 or 2 command points, which in 10th edition, where CP is going to be a lot less prolific everywhere, does seem like a pretty good investment, I think. All in all, I think the shock troops look like still a very solid troops choice for the Guard, and for me personally, big squads of 20 sound really good fun to play around with and should be quite potent on the battlefield. The bigger unit we get shown is of course the Baneblade, which, as you would expect, is super beefy. Its toughness 13 has a 2-up save and has a whopping 24 wounds, so yes, he is a very tough nut to crack. Like the Necron Monolith, he also has an OC value of 8, so again he is great at just sitting there and holding an objective all by himself, and he actually has a really good movement of 9 inches as well, so he really can chug around the board and get where you need him to be, and also potentially provide some cover to your advancing infantry, which on the subject of that, he does really well with his new rolling fortress rule. And what this does is it lets him almost count as moving cover for your infantry. As long as a unit isn't wholly visible to an enemy because of the Baneblade, your unit that is behind the Baneblade counts as having cover. So this is sort of the idea of the infantry moving up behind the tanks, which you see in a lot of, World War II sort of films, and getting cover from enemy firepower. So for me, this is super, super fluffy. I love it. I think it's a really great way to play the Astra Militarum, and really, really great image of them moving up the board behind all their armored tanks. And it seems like a really good ability in terms of its power as well. You can easily get something like your shock troops up to their 3-up save now by advancing them up behind the Baneblade and then giving them their take cover order that will get them to their 3-up save. So it does add a good bit of survivability to your infantry as well. On the firepower front, the Baneblade cannon is still 3d6 shots. It did lose a pip of AP going down to -2, but it is now strength 12 instead of strength 9. So it is still very much a solid anti-tank and anti-infantry gun, no matter what you're shooting at. And then on top of that, we also get to see its new Demolisher Cannon. And this is good news for Vindicator players, myself included, because that seems like it's just got a flat buff. It has gone from just D6 shots to D6 plus 3, and has jumped from strength 10 to strength 14. So that is quite brilliant. And again, I think the Demolisher Cannon is as well going to be good going into either tanks or things like Terminator squads really quite efficiently. Moving away from the Baneblade though, we also got a few other weapon spotlights. The famous Lehman Russ Battle Cannon was shown off, and this still sports the same D6 plus 3 shots, but it's now strength 10 instead of strength 8. It did also lose a pip of AP, dropping to -1 instead of -2, so it's really not going to be all that great at punching through armor anymore, and honestly, the bump to 10 instead of 8 isn't quite as amazing as it seems, thanks to the increased vehicle toughness. Although on the plus side, you are now wounding T5 enemies on 2s rather than 3s, so that's pretty handy. And if things like Orc Boys and Necron Lichguard are still T5, then that's pretty much just a flat buff against those sort of infantry units. But I think in general, the Battle Cannon, the Lehman Russ Battle Cannon, for me seems more of a side grade than anything. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm completely off base on this, but for me, the Lehman Russ Battle Cannon, thanks to the loss of 1 AP and the gain of 2 strength, seems like a side grade to me. Like, it's still not bad, it's still 3 damage, still going to do a lot of work, but it doesn't seem like as big a buff as some of the other things we've seen from the previews. We then get to what is possibly the strongest gun in the entire game, at the moment anyway. I'm sure that will be superseded in new codexes. But the Shadow Sword's Volcano Cannon got shown off, and oh boy, is this thing going to cause a stir. It is D3 plus 1 shots, with blast and heavy, so it can get +1 to hit if it sits still. And then it's strength 24, yep, strength 24, so wounding anything that is toughness 12 or below on 2s. Still means that it's going to be wounding things like the new Orc Stomper, the Baneblade we just saw, and presumably Imperial Knights on 3s. But most things this will be wounding on 2s. It has a terrifying -5 AP, and still the frankly absurd flat 12 damage. So yes, this thing will still pretty much melt anything it looks at. Funnily, it has actually had a drop from the current D3 plus 3 shots to D3 plus 1, but to make up for that somewhat, the new blast rule does work a lot better on it compared to the blast that it has at the moment. Blast now, from what I understand, gives you extra shots depending on how many models is in a unit. So for every 5 models in a unit, you get +1 shot, whereas the current blast just gives you a minimum of 3 or, flat max shots if it's over 11 models in the unit. So I think blast does allow this to go into bigger enemy squads with a bit more efficiency than the current version. But of course, what you really want to be shooting this at is enemy knights and enemy super heavies. And from that perspective, it has had a slight nerf because it's gone to D3 plus 1 shots instead of D3 plus 3. But still, if we take the Land Raider we saw the other day as an example, if the Shadow Sword doesn't move, if it sits still, the Volcano Cannon will on average do about 20 wounds to the new and improved Land Raider, so it will still easily obliterate it in one volley. So it's still a very, very good anti-tank gun. It's just arguably a little bit less good at going into single model units now, but it has got better at going into bigger squads if that's the only thing you have to shoot at. I mean, hopefully that won't be the case, because that does seem like a waste. You want this going into big knights and tanks, but if the only thing on the board left is a big squad of 30 orc boys, this will do slightly more damage than the current version, I think. Finally for today, we also got shown a stratagem. This is a 2CP stratagem, but it is a very, very good one. Reinforcements lets you select a regiment unit that has been destroyed. In any phase you can do this stratagem, and you can bring on a new identical unit to the battlefield from reserves. So that big 20-man squad of Acadian shock troops, you can get a whole new unit of them for 2CP, which, as you can tell, is quite a nice return for your investment. They do state that things like Rough Riders, Sentinels and Heavy Weapon Squads are all regiment units, so any of these can potentially come back to rejoin the fight, although they do of course clarify that character units lost with the squad don't come back, because that would be a little bit much and also a little bit unfluffy. If a character or a leader has died, probably can't bring him back, but another squad of infantry, yeah, you've probably got about 6 million of them behind you, so it makes sense for them to come back. Overall, this does seem to be a really good stratagem. I think 2CP may be a bit much in the CP restrictive form that 10th edition looks to be taking, but still, to get 20 fresh bodies to go and retake an objective or just unleash a load more firepower into the enemy, I think for 2CP that could well be worth the investment depending on how the game is going for you. So there we go, once again a great little preview for 10th edition. All of them so far have filled me with a load of hype and excitement. For the Guard, it looks like a lot of familiar stuff. There's nothing here that is really changing the game, really kind of reinventing the wheel. It's just stuff that we sort of know and love and understand and recognize, but it does have some very nice 10th edition updates. They still look super fun, they still look like they're going to be a very capable army, and if you have always loved the idea of playing the underdog, the beleaguered mortal man of the 41st millennium, then I do think that the Astra Militarum will still look to be a very, very good pick for your 10th edition army. But, as always, what do you think of the Guard, and what do you think of these rules that we have been shown? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.